Bert Kerrigan here. In 1999, I was senior chaplain to the moderator of the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland. As the principal clerk had declined an invitation to the moderator to preside at the Uniting Presbyterian Church of Southern Africa, the two moderators of the Uniting Churches came to Edinburgh and persuaded us that the Scottish moderator should be there due to the fact that both churches were founded by Scottish missionaries. We reversed the decision and attended. It was a wonderful experience, especially the communion service, which I had to organise, with 2,000 in the hall in Port Elizabeth and another 3,000 outside. However, nothing had been planned for our final 3 days, and the Rev Dr Maker stepped in and brought us to St Columba's. Thus, for 2 decades, there has been this very welcome connection with St Columba's, which has given me the privilege of delivering the St Columba's lecture twice and preaching frequently. My last visit was in November 2019, when this welcome sign greeted me, and I spoke at the Wednesday evening talk as well as preaching on the Sunday. I reckon I have 2 spiritual homes, Greyfriars Kirk in Edinburgh and St Columba's in Johannesburg. Here you see Greyfriars, and the internal shot shows our minister, Rev Dr Richard Fraser, with the Rev Dr Chunky Young when he was visiting Scotland. I returned to St Columba's and enjoyed the hospitality of Alan and Margie Maker. Always slightly unpredictable, on one occasion my son and I arrived from Australia on a Sunday to discover that Alan had put me down to preach at the evening service. My son regarded the lack of preparation time I had as a great blessing, as it meant that the sermon would not be too long. Over the years, my friendship with Chunky Young became stronger, and I had the delight of visits from Chunky and Wendy in Scotland, and also the opportunity to come out to St Columba's and enjoy their hospitality. Undoubtedly, the Youngs drew the short straw. I did have the pleasure of coming out for Matthew's 21st birthday, and on a later trip when I would have had to stay for a week, deep vein thrombosis sustained in the international journey meant that I actually ended up staying with them for 2 months. I was able, in some ways, to work my keep, in the sense that Chunky was finishing his doctorate for Princeton, and I was able to take some of the load off him by preaching on the Sundays. Sadly, I returned for Wendy's funeral and the great loss which we all sustained in her death. One of the benefits the St Columba's lecturer enjoys is the generous hospitality of Arnold and Iris Fair at Thornybush, and I have had the privilege, as I've lectured twice, of going there, and I also managed to join in on a visit when Ian Torrance was the guest lecturer. I've also had the pleasure of coming out for two major young family events. The first, the marriage of Garreth and Kerri, and later the marriage of Matthew and Tina, both of which were splendid occasions, although on both occasions there were thunderstorms and we ran for cover from one part of venue to the other. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to come out for Chunky's wedding to Elvina Stewart, but they visited in Edinburgh, and also I visited them a number of times in Johannesburg, when I also enjoyed the great hospitality of Ernie and Elna Blom. It was devastating news to learn of Chunky's untimely death, and of course the particular loss which was suffered by Elvina, by Garreth and Kerri, by Matthew and Tina, and by Chunky's wider family. He had been so looking forward to Alistair Anquetil coming to St Columba's, but that was not to be in his time. The strong connection with the Makers was maintained, including Alan baptising Erin, the youngest child of Garreth and Kerri, and the celebration of the christening afterwards. The second St Columba's lecture gave me the opportunity to come back to Thornybush, this time with the Reverend Alistair and Joanne Anquetil and the Reverend James Elias. Matthew and Tina also joined us for the excellent trip, and you see the wildlife at the other side of the lagoon. The 50th anniversary for Alan and Margie Maker of their marriage was celebrated at the St Columba's community, and also 50 years of what I describe as joint ministry. Margie set in motion decades ago the tradition of the Christmas lunch, which has given many disadvantaged people not only a meal, but a feeling of community, and which has been sacrificially supported by the congregation throughout. South Africa's loss was Britain's gain, as Matthew and Tina emigrated here and came up for New Year in Scotland. And later I had the pleasure of making my first acquaintanceship with Jack down in London. St Columba's hospitality is legendary, and I've had the pleasure of meals with many in the congregation. Ernie Blom, of course, latterly insisted that I produce a return ticket and a certificate of good health before any further visit, and happily that's operated smoothly. Of Lorna Thomas, I can say I kent her father, in that the very Reverend Dr Andrew Erin Lorna's father, was the moderator of the General Assembly, who brought me into the inner life and workings of the Church of Scotland, and we had a very long and happy relationship. At the Bloms, there was always the opportunity to meet other members of the congregation, including Lorna Wybrow, whose hospitality I enjoyed on an earlier visit. So you celebrate the 100th anniversary of the founding of St Columba's with the Reverend Jaco Bester and the Reverend Alistair Anquetil. Their enthusiasm and youth, I still see youth in this year when Alistair celebrates his 40th birthday. They will lead you in this next and exciting phase of life at St Columba's, and I look forward to the opportunity to visit in future and wish you Godspeed in the years that are to come. Bye-bye.